Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about John Cena. John Cena holds the all-time record for the most Make-A-Wish visits by far, personally granting over 650 wishes for children with life-threatening illnesses. Many of these visits have taken place in intensive care units or hospice settings, oftentimes with children who would pass away weeks or even days later. Hospital staff have said Cena routinely stays far longer than scheduled, sitting with families after cameras are gone, letting kids talk about fear, death, or unfinished dreams while he stayed fully in character as their hero. He's never publicized these encounters himself and refuses to use them for branding, saying he sees them as his life's purpose rather than for charity. Cena has also privately supported veterans suffering from severe PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, including meeting wounded soldiers who believed their lives were over due to permanent disabilities. Several veterans later said those conversations with the wrestling legend single-handedly saved their life. Cena has consistently avoided receiving any public credit for these interactions. Alright, this David case is getting out of hand crazy at this point. So if you haven't been following, 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez went missing in August of 2025, and after several weeks with no sightings, her body was discovered on September 8th inside the front trunk of an abandoned Tesla registered to musician David in the Hollywood Hills. She was wrapped in plastic, dismembered, severely decomposed, and the medical examiner couldn't immediately determine how she died or how long she'd been dead. Now the newest details reveal that her remains had actually been frozen before being placed in the car, and that's a major problem for investigators. Freezing and thawing a body destroys bruising, masks injuries, washes away blood patterns, and can literally erase the signs that tell examiners whether someone was beaten, stabbed, strangled, or died another way. After the body was frozen, it then sat in the Tesla for 2 to 4 weeks, thawing and decomposing while wiping out whatever forensic clues were left. David hasn't cooperated and remains a suspect but still hasn't been arrested yet because the autopsy is incomplete and prosecutors can't file major charges until the cause of death is confirmed. The freezing detail is why investigators are now struggling to determine when she died, what was done to her, and who handled her body in the weeks she was missing. David's upcoming tour dates, album promo, and public appearances have all been canceled as the case remains under investigation. Proof that animals are evolving, Part 16. A 34-year-old orangutan at the Metro Richmond Zoo in Virginia named Patrick was given a royal cloak for his birthday, and without any training, he tied it around himself like a wearable outfit. Orangutans are already known for advanced problem-solving and tool use, but moments like this show just how far that intelligence can go. Instead of playing with it, Patrick used the fabric with a clear purpose. It's a small moment, but it highlights the level of cognitive ability orangutans are capable of. This orb weaver spider had nowhere to attach the bottom of its web, so it made its own anchor. With no stable point to build from, it picked up a small rock and used it to hold the entire structure together. Orb weavers are known for their precise, almost mechanical construction, but this goes beyond instinct. It shows they can adjust their strategy when conditions change, solving problems in real time. In this case, the spider effectively created a solution to the missing piece of its environment, creatively allowing it to hunt in a place it otherwise couldn't have. Why is he doing that, though? Here's an image showing what the sinking of the Titanic would have actually looked like on April 15, 1912. It was a moonless night in the North Atlantic, and once the ship's power failed, the massive liner disappeared into near total darkness, leaving over 1,500 people unable to clearly see the ship, the lifeboats, or even each other. Many survivors later reported hearing screams from the water but couldn't see anything, as the lack of light turned the disaster into something disorienting and almost invisible. It wasn't just the freezing temperatures that made it so horrifying, it was also the darkness, where one of the worst disasters in maritime history unfolded out of sight. In 1922, a young girl with severe diabetes was photographed while essentially waiting to die, at a time when the condition was almost always fatal, especially in children. Before there was any treatment, patients were often placed on near-starvation diets to slow the disease, leaving them dangerously weak while their bodies continued to deteriorate. That same year, doctors administered a new experimental treatment called insulin, one of the first times it had ever been used on a human. Within days, patients who were expected to die began to recover. The discovery transformed diabetes from a death sentence into a manageable condition almost overnight. Morbid Facts, Part 951. Steven Stucker, best known for playing the chaotic air controller in Airplane, died in 1986 at just 38 years old due to complications with AIDS. At the time, the disease was still poorly understood, widely feared, and heavily stigmatized, especially within the entertainment industry. He publicly revealed his diagnosis in 1985, making him one of the first recognizable entertainers to speak openly about having AIDS during a period when many kept it hidden out of fear of backlash and discrimination. Like many early AIDS patients, his condition quickly deteriorated before any effective treatments existed. His death came at a time when thousands were dying under similar circumstances, helping to bring more visibility to a crisis that had long been ignored. In 1978, in Birmingham, England, medical photographer Janet Parker became the last person to die from smallpox after being exposed at the University of Birmingham Medical School, likely through airborne transmission from a laboratory working with the virus just one floor below her office. She developed symptoms days later and died on September 11th after several weeks in isolation. The outbreak triggered a massive public health response, including quarantines and emergency vaccines, but no further cases spread beyond Janet. During the crisis, her father suffered a fatal heart attack while visiting her in the hospital. The laboratory's head, Professor Henry Bedson, later died by suicide amid intense scrutiny over the incident.
Do what? I shot Sergeant Gibson. I pulled a gun on him. Can you investigate me? Is he breathing? He just fell out.
That was the voice of police officer Michael Rusk calling 911 in James City County, Virginia in 2023, telling dispatch he had just shot his own sergeant after claiming he was about to be sexually assaulted. According to Rusk, Gibson had made prior unwanted advances, and that night the situation escalated when Gibson allegedly tried to force himself onto him. During the struggle, Rusk said he repeatedly told him to stop before pulling out his gun and firing several shots. Michael's father, Jason Rusk, said he told him about unwanted attention he received from his superior officer leading up to the shooting, and that he'd reported it to others in the department several times.
There was a year's worth of grooming that had taken place. Extremely inappropriate touching, stalking, the grooming, the previous to the incident assaults.
Here's a video showing the officers at the bar prior to the shooting, where Gibson gets out of his seat to sit next to Rusk before reaching over to hold his hand, which Rusk appears to turn down. Then, about an hour before the shooting, the two can be seen outside before apparently leaving together. Gibson puts his hand on Rusk's shoulder, and Rusk responds by pushing him away and pointing a finger in his face. It's unclear what happened next, but after the shooting, Rusk made this claim to the dispatcher.
I told him to stop. He kept going. I thought he was gonna help me. Help.
Gibson was hit several times and survived after emergency surgery. When officers arrived, Rusk was still on the scene and was immediately taken into custody. Investigators said the physical evidence didn't fully support a clear-cut self-defense claim, leading to Rusk being charged with several felonies. In 2024, Rusk took a plea deal, avoiding active prison time, but losing his career in law enforcement and his right to carry a firearm. This was the moment a young boy with autism was seen walking alone on a monorail track at Hershey Park, dozens of feet above the ground. He'd been missing for about 20 minutes after getting separated from his family, and somehow made his way onto the restricted area of the monorail. People below him started shouting in panic, trying to guide him, but he seemed overwhelmed and confused and kept changing direction along the narrow track. Thankfully, one man rushed over, climbed onto a nearby structure, and pulled himself up onto the track. He carefully approached the boy, picked him up, and carried him back to safety before eventually reuniting him with his parents. This was the moment a boy was suddenly electrocuted after touching a metal door in a condominium courtyard. What looked like a normal exit somehow became live with electricity, locking his muscles in place and leaving him unable to let go. Within seconds, his friend realized what was happening and grabbed him by the legs to pull him free. In situations like this, the safest option is always to cut the power or use something non-conductive to separate them. But when there's no time and someone is actively being electrocuted, people sometimes resort to physically tackling them to break the contact. Cases like this are almost always caused by faulty wiring or poor grounding. Insane coincidences involving 9/11, Part 2. Michael Jackson had a meeting scheduled at the top of one of the Twin Towers on the morning of 9/11. But the night before, he was up until 3 a.m. chatting on the phone with his mom, and he ended up sleeping through the appointment. On that same morning, President George Bush's cousin Jim Pierce had a meeting scheduled on the 105th floor of the South Tower. But his group was apparently too large, so they rescheduled the meeting across the street last minute. In an episode of Johnny Bravo, there's a poster showing a building on fire with the words "Coming Soon." The episode aired in April of 2001, just 5 months before 9/11. In January of 2001, the World Trade Center's lease was sold to Larry Silverstein. Larry then took out an insurance policy that happened to include terrorism in its coverage. After 9/11, he took the insurance company to court and claimed that he should be paid double because there were 2 attacks. He won and was awarded $4.5 billion. Morbid facts about Michael Jackson, Part 1. As a child, Michael's father Joseph would constantly torment him about his appearance, often calling him Fat Nose. Michael went on to have 4 rhinoplasties and was insecure about his appearance for his entire life. According to his former doctor, Conrad Murray, Michael's father chemically castrated him when he was a young boy. He reportedly did this so that Michael would maintain his high-pitched singing voice into adulthood. On one occasion in the 1960s, Joe wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through the window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. But the abuse didn't stop there. Joe would also hold onto a belt while the Jackson 5 rehearsed, ready to strike his children if one of them made a mistake. Michael was reportedly so terrified of his father that he would sometimes throw up just from merely being in his presence. He once said he felt the safest while performing on stage since his father wouldn't be able to beat him in front of a crowd. From a very young age, Michael described being forced into long, exhausting rehearsals for hours at a time, completely missing out on a normal childhood. He said watching other kids play from the window while he rehearsed was one of the memories that stayed with him the most. Morbid facts, Part 985. In 1989 in Bangkok, Thailand, Billy Idol went on a drug-fueled binge after a breakup that spiraled out of control. Later admitted the trip involved heroin, alcohol, and heavy tranquilizer use, leaving him erratic and destructive. He reportedly trashed multiple luxury hotel suites, leaving behind severe damage and hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills. The situation soon escalated to the point where authorities were forced to intervene. Billy later said he was tranquilized and strapped to a military stretcher before being carried out and deported, with the Thai army reportedly involved in carrying him out. Idol has since described the incident as one of the lowest points of his life, driven by severe drug abuse and a reckless lifestyle that nearly destroyed him. In 1999 in Towanda, Pennsylvania, 11-year-old Adam Herman disappeared from his adoptive home. No missing persons report was filed at the time. For years afterward, his adoptive parents told family he was returned to state custody, while continuing to claim him as a dependent on taxes, legal filings, and collecting adoptive subsidy payments. In 2008, after his adoptive sister tried to reconnect with him as an adult, she discovered records falsely showed he had lived with the family until age 18. She then reported him missing nearly a decade after he vanished. The adoptive parents were later convicted of fraud for collecting thousands in payments after his disappearance, but no one has ever been charged in connection with what happened to Adam, as his fate remains unknown. Morbid facts, Part 479. In 2004, 40-year-old Marion Carver set out on a week-long Alaskan cruise by herself. Just 2 days into the voyage, her steward noticed that she was missing, but was told by his supervisor to just do your job and forget about it. Therefore, the woman's disappearance went unreported, and at the end of the cruise, most of her belongings were allegedly disposed of. Carver was only reported missing by her father more than a week after she disappeared, when she never returned home from her trip. To this day, no trace of her has ever been found, as her fate remains a total mystery. In 1963, a stray tuxedo cat named Felicette became the first and only cat to go to space. She was launched by French scientists and spent 15 minutes in a rocket before returning to Earth. She was euthanized shortly afterwards so scientists could study her brain. In 1998, Polish college student Katarzyna Zawada went missing when she was supposed to meet up with her mom. A few months later, a tugboat suddenly stopped working because a pile of human skin got stuck in the propeller. When the remains were examined, it was determined that the skin was deliberately removed from the torso while the limbs and head were cut off. DNA testing soon linked it to the missing woman, and researchers eventually concluded that her murderer had been wearing her skin as a bodysuit. Morbid facts, Part 489. This was the last photo ever taken of Marco Siffredi, the first man to descend Mount Everest on a snowboard. He was attempting his second descent in 2002 when Sherpas urged him not to go due to bad weather conditions, but Siffredi ignored their warnings and was never seen again. In 1999, Little League baseball player Kevin Stephen was hit in the chest by a baseball bat, causing his heart to suddenly stop. Luckily, off-duty nurse Penny Brown was in attendance and saved the boy's life by giving him CPR. 7 years later, Penny Brown was choking at a restaurant when one of the workers rushed over to give her the Heimlich maneuver, thus saving her life. That worker was Kevin Stephen. Jacques Hebert was a revolutionary French journalist during the Reign of Terror, who was heavily in favor of beheading anyone who disagreed with his radical views. After he accused Marie Antoinette of incest with her son, Hebert was sentenced to death via guillotine. He reportedly fainted several times on the way to his execution and screamed hysterically when placed under the blade. To amuse the crowd and make a statement, the executioners rigged the blade to stop inches from Hebert's neck. They did this 3 times before finally executing him on the 4th attempt. Morbid Facts, Part 490. While filming for Gladiator, Oliver Reed died suddenly after challenging a group of sailors to a drinking contest at a bar. The actor consumed 8 pints of beer, 12 shots of rum, several shots of cognac, and an entire bottle of whiskey. He fell ill during the match and collapsed, dying of a heart attack in the ambulance en route to the hospital. It ended up costing the production company $3 million to recreate Reed's face with CGI, so he could appear in all the scenes that still needed to be filmed. Here's a photo taken by Challenger Deep of a beer bottle resting on the ocean floor 35,000 feet down, the deepest known point on the Earth's surface. This is the last known photo taken of Janet Johnson, a famous American mountaineer known for completing many difficult climbs throughout the world. She disappeared along with her friend John Cooper during a climb in 1973, until their bodies were found separately 2 years later, both wearing just one shoe and missing their ice picks. Cooper was found with a bloody wound on his stomach and a look of horror frozen on his face. Accordingly, several people, including examiners of the autopsy, believe that both Cooper and Johnson were murdered. The photo above was only discovered in 2020 when climbers found Janet's backpack and camera within the melting glacier. Morbid Facts, Part 540. In 2006, 26-year-old Illinois teacher and wrestler Samson Shelton admitted to police that he raped a 17-year-old student before choking her and tossing her body into a wooded area. He then put a belt around her neck to make it look like she was strangled and left her for dead, after which Shelton went line dancing with friends. Suffering from brain damage and a broken neck, the teenager survived but had to relearn how to swallow, walk, and talk. But despite his heinous crimes, Shelton was released on parole just last year after serving out 17 of his 20-year prison sentence. In 2008, a train traveling 70 miles an hour struck and killed an 18-year-old man who was running across the tracks and apparently didn't realize how fast the train was moving. The impact flung the man's body over 100 feet, and his flying body parts knocked a 58-year-old woman to the ground, breaking her wrist, shoulder, and leg. The woman later sued the man's family on the basis that, if you did something as stupid as this guy did, you have to be responsible for what comes from it. Morbid Facts, Part 547. Just last year, a 23-year-old man died from a catastrophic spinal injury while playing at a Topgolf with some friends. In what was described as a prank gone wrong, his drunken friends had pushed him off the platform, causing him to miss the safety netting and fall 12 feet directly onto his head. In 1990, a flight heading from Medellin, Colombia to New York City crashed onto a hillside after running out of fuel, killing nearly half of the passengers on board. While being treated for serious injuries, 2 of the male passengers were arrested when ER doctors found baggies of cocaine that they'd swallowed and attempted to smuggle. Both men were sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. The British Pet Massacre was a week-long event in 1939 during which an estimated 400,000